Welcome to CaCo Talks, the weekly podcast where conversations about life, hot topics, mental health, and more take center stage. We are your hosts, Catelyn and Courtney Geiger.
Together, we explore thought-provoking discussions with an ambient vibe that inspires open and honest dialogue. So sit back, relax, and join us for some insightful conversation that will leave you feeling informed and inspired.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is having a glorious week. Well, it's Friday, so hopefully a glorious weekend, right? But we are going to talk about silent twins because, first of all, we are twins. So I thought it was going to be a cool perspective that we could add to that particular movie, which is based off of a true story, as well as it's a very peculiar movie, to be honest. What were your initial thoughts, Courtney?
I mean, I'm always looking at things from a filmmaker's perspective. And so I was like, this is a very, very stylized, formalistic movie, which means it really it's relying on kind of more of these like not real elements, realistic elements to tell the narrative, which I thought were strong actually in that piece. But it is overall just like as a viewer, it's a disturbing narrative. I mean, it's disturbing but interesting. You got a little bit of empathy and compassion thrown in there, and it's like it's a very interesting way to depict basically a biopic because this is based on an actual twin. So this is a really fresh take on how to present a biographical story. So I thought that was really interesting. But overall, I would say I was left with like a range of emotions. I didn't know whether to like really empathize or to be like well deserved or like really be happy at the end. Like it was a range of emotions, and maybe that's what the filmmakers wanted. So.
Yeah, and I think because the this is a spoiler alert.
Yes,
because the twins are silent. You have to rely on other things to get the cues that you would normally get through conversation in film or like through seeing things, through actually seeing things. But like you usually have those two things working together to give you context. Versus in this, you didn't have the voice or like the hearing part of things to comprehend what was going on. So you heavily relied on those little intricate stylistic things to get what was going on. So
oh yeah, absolutely. I thought that was that's always a difficult thing when you're writing these sorts of things. Like the main character does not speak to the audience or to even other characters in the story. So that's a big hurdle you have to get over. The only good positive thing there was like with that is like they spoke to each other. So we got some context there, but I feel like their speech, the way they would speak to each other was very warped and sort of delusional. So you weren't even always getting a straight, like, just plot by plot point kind of narrative,
Yeah.
So you had to infer a lot, I think. And I think they definitely did a good enough job. Sometimes it was murky, like what was kind of really going on. But I think they did a good enough job of like transmitting, the actual just narrative of like what happened in their lives, in June and Jennifer's lives.
And I think it, to me, like the murkiness, because I agree with you, there's something you're just like, what? I think that as the, because we're kind of like viewing them as in like real time, right?
Yeah.
So that adds to the how people actually felt like seeing them. So that I think that was more like a stylistic choice. Because I can only imagine what people were like thinking seeing this.
Exactly.
It must have been extremely murky.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because like, I don't know. I mean, it started out, I don't know if you felt this way, but like it started out kind of like, I felt very compassionate for the girls because I feel like they were bullied at school. They were kind of outsiders in their family. And like, I understand what it means to like be silent in some ways. And maybe everybody can relate to this too. And we can talk about it later in the episode, but I had a lot more empathy for them as young kids. As I got older and I was like, they're making choices now. And so it made it feel like I was like less empathetic, but maybe I should have been more empathetic at the end because it was like just trauma based responses. I don't know.
I want to know
your perspective on that too. Is like, were you empathetic for them? at the end?
I think I was empathetic. And here's why. I think that they made a choice at a young age out of thinking it was fun and convenient, right? That ultimately was their demise. And so I think what really happened was they just couldn't get out of it. And so I guess for context, I don't want to give like a whole bunch of spoilers, but for context, there's these two twins. They're named June and Jennifer. They live in United Kingdom. And so they make a pact, if you will, to only communicate to each other. And so they are known as the Silent Twins because of that, because they only really talked with each other, and then there was like a few people who would briefly communicate with them via like writing on notes. Maybe like they would communicate using a few words to outside people, like their therapist. And then at some age they got into crime and they had to go to a mental institution. And so there they were at one point separated. So they were separated prior to that, and then they were separated at one point again in the mental institution where they lived there pretty much their whole life. And so one of them, this is just a quick narrative. There's more to it. Like, go watch the movie. But one of them ends up passing away. So that's just like a little quick little run over so you can get like a brief context. But no, I definitely felt empathetic for them, because it's just like they couldn't get out of this web of just like, who do I trust? And then also too, as an adult, it's like you rely on those things that you learn through like trust and communicating, and they didn't have that to even begin with, to take that into other relationships. So like, who are they going to talk to truly? Because nobody else is going to understand them.
But I also, I just felt like at the end they were making some really problematic choices. And that's what made me have a slightly less empathy for them, because I was like, they were fully aware of like what they were doing. Like, they committed arson, and
when they were teenagers.
When they were teenagers, yeah. And then as they got older, then they still had this kind of like undercurrent of like revenge in some ways, I guess, like get back at like society for bullying them in some ways. And like they were like siphoning the man's semen because one of them was trying to get pregnant. Like, it was just like all the stuff. I was like, they were aware. They were aware enough to do these things. Yeah. They were always premeditated. It was never like, I'll just happen to do this. It was premeditated stuff.
For sure. I do agree with that. I do think, and I think also too, like they lived in a predominantly white European United Kingdom, I guess town. I don't know what you call them. So I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. But so I'm sure they felt very out of place. Resources were probably not as readily available. And then there was other children in the household, so it wasn't like they could just cater to the twins and what they needed. They actually had like a physical speech impediment. So I think that also contributed to them not being able to communicate with other people. And when I say they were silent, like they didn't even communicate to their siblings. Like they pretty much slowly but surely cut the siblings out, cut the parents out, and wouldn't communicate with the parents. And so it was literally like, on your one hand, you could count how many people they were communicating with. And it was not like verbal communication like we're communicating. It was like little notes, or like randomly yelling out a word, or you know what I mean? Like it's not what we would deem as communication.
Yeah.
So
I think they represent true codependence in a very...
Oh yeah.
It started out sort of like excusable, but then it became so much more toxic, I think.
Yeah. It's kind of like when it's cute when they're doing it at 4, but like it's not cute when they're doing it at 24.
It's not cute at 16. Yeah, it's not cute at that age.
It's just not cute.
And I think it had like, I don't know, I think they tried, at least in the movie they portrayed that they were trying everything they could have tried, But I think, to be honest, I think their method of trying to fix them was like kind of, they came at it from a fix angle rather than understand. And I think maybe that was just what child psychology was back in 70s, 80s.
I was going to say, I think medicine at the
But
time was like, oh, everything is a mental illness if it's anything different from what we consider as the norm. And so that was, I think, the wrong approach, just because that pushes them, I think, further into relying on each other. And like being a twin, I understand that level of like codependency, because we even had that, even though we were pretty opposites.
Yeah.
We were in different classrooms, we did different things. But if someone was not forcing us to be interdependent and not have codependency, we could have possibly been the same way.
It's like, remember Mark and Matthew?
Yes,
they were on a different
level. Yeah.
They weren't quite, I mean, they didn't seem to have a destructive streak, but I do feel like they were very quiet twins. And they livened up when they were speaking to each other or with each other.
Yeah, and even they would have like little things that they would do to communicate to each other without ever opening their mouths.
Yeah, they were very like, I would say they were probably codependent, not as extreme as the girls here. But they were highly codependent. And I remember them getting a lot of slack for it, I felt like. Like, I feel like people would try to purposely push them just because they were like, well, why aren't you talking to us? And like, that's such the wrong thing to do. Do not do that.
For sure, yeah.
I think that's the wrong thing to do. But that's, again, people trying to fix them because they want to feel like this person's okay or this person's whatever.
Exactly.
Versus understanding why somebody would behave that way in the first place. And that's what I think was wrong in the movie. They were like, well, why aren't you talking? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you? And like,
very pushy.
All of the therapists were like very like third party, trying to like understand from the outside versus like treating them as like they probably had a mental health issue, maybe even a genetic one. Maybe they had like autism or Asperger's or something like that. They might have had some issues like that, and that's why they probably shut down and responded the way that they did to.
But I don't think those things were like well known or documented or researched at that time. Like that was like
everything was just so and so's different or special or crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty much if you were not normal, you're going to the crazy house kind of thing.
I think now everything we have so much more awareness. Now we know that like there's a spectrum of these things, and that you don't have there's certain ways you can get someone into like normal life or some semblance of functioning life if they do have something like Asperger's or they have something that's very, like that. So I think that maybe if they would have been born in a different time, they might have had a different outlook in life,
Oh, for sure. I definitely think so.
Because I definitely
think so.
I think they were sort of just like, it was just old school methods of doing things that were harmful and not helpful, Yeah. So
I have a question. Which twin do you identify with?
I mean, I think I definitely identify more with June. She was a little more subdued. I think I identify more with her. I think so. You think I'm Jennifer?
I think okay, so I don't think you're quite Jennifer, but I feel like you have more things in common with Jennifer.
How so?
Like, especially as children, like you were very just like, I'm doing what I want to do. This is how we're doing it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously now
like the
maybe
twin
not.
Dynamic.
Yeah, like the twin dynamic. Like, I feel like you were just like if we were getting in trouble, Courtney was probably the leader. Period. Yeah. So, like, and that's what I mean by that is like, I think.
Yeah. from that angle, yes, I can see. I was thinking about June as she got older and was like more, because June started becoming a writer and like was much more subdued and like, we should think about this twice, which is probably more me now than as a kid. Like I can see as a younger person, I was probably more Jennifer, like, let's try this, do that kind of thing, or like.
So do you feel like I'm more Jennifer like in adulthood?
I don't think you're more Jennifer, which is like, that's the good thing is like, if we were Jennifer and June, we would be up shit creek,
for sure.
But,
clearly.
But I think you're probably more, I would say you're probably more June's type character. But as like we've gotten to be adults, we balanced out a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Like
I think also too, like we're separate.
June.
Yeah. I think also because we were separate and we were separated in like high school and middle school and stuff like that. So that allowed us to, we have a little bit of Jennifer and June for ourselves on like an independence level versus they were solely relying on Jennifer for one thing and June for the other thing. So that level of codependency is the self-destruction, essentially.
Yeah. I wonder how much the parents' decisions had to play in that, because those early decisions, the parents were making those. Like our mom decided to separate us at a very early age. Like we were never in the same classes unless it was by coincidence.
Yeah.
Like,
and that was in high school.
And like middle school, high school. That's when we really started having, and we would have like one class together because it was like we just.
And it wasn't by coincidence. It was honestly, I was going to say, it wasn't even coincidence. It was honestly because that was the only class they had offered.
It was always that. In high school we never even had a class together, did we?
No, we only had the French class together in
middle school.
And let's be honest, I'm not going to lie. Like having a class with you, especially in like middle school, it gave me a different level of confidence because I was like, I really can show my behind. And like in that French class, we were definitely like,
because we knew each other's like rapport. We knew how we were going to behave. We knew
there was a different level of confidence in that class. Obviously, like the teacher wasn't fantastic, so there was also that, but there was a different level of confidence in the things that we were doing. Not saying that we were like off the wall, but like we were definitely way more outspoken. We were probably doing things we probably should not have been doing, but everybody was, let's be honest, but everybody was in the class. So on the defense, but it was just like I get it, because like I'm a twin and I'm like I get the codependency, because when me and Courtney were together, we were like self-destructing, but if some of those things would have been reported, we could have gotten in serious trouble.
Yeah. I definitely think I'm glad Mom made the exact decision early on. I think that was a very smart thing for her to do, to separate us as children, so that we really had to like learn how to be functioning individuals and like learn social skills on our own, learn how to interact with people on our own and not rely on my twin sister to always be, because unfortunately we saw like other twins who did that, and it became a much bigger issue later on. Like I think Mom, they were like, why don't we just put them in the same class? And Mom's like, no, absolutely not. Do not do that.
For real.
She was very much like, separate them, because I don't want them depending on each other. They have to grow up and be adult individuals. And that's so true. And we see this in this movie. It's like you came together, and the first thing people want to do is just put you together. But reality is you still are an individual human being. You have to exist.
And even in this movie, you can see that, like, especially when they got older, Jennifer was the more she was like the leader of the group, but she was way more rooted in like deception and deceiving and like the darkness of what you don't want to be. In June, like, definitely like battles with that because that's not something that she's true to anymore. Like, she's really more of like a creative, a more positive person, more light and fun and things like that, vibrant, if you will, versus Jennifer.
It's like dark.
Isn't that so? But Jennifer is just so determined, I guess, to have things the way she sees fit, that she's like sucks that out of June and makes June just comply with her.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting take, because I had never actually seen that. People don't think about the dynamics of the twins in a group. They always think, like we were saying, the twins from the outside. So they're like, how does this pair work for us or interact with us? Versus looking at the dynamics between those two individuals. And what we really see is that it was really like this, like yin and yang, like this dark and light pair in them. But the like codependency of that is what really made it very problematic. Because the truth is, if they had been able to early on stand on their own and not just only speak a language amongst themselves, Jennifer might have still gone down a negative path, but June could have potentially not been in that same position. Like I felt like at the end, I was like, I don't think June was as mentally off as Jennifer was.
Agreed.
I think June was probably more sane and could live a normal, existence outside of an institution. But because of her codependency to her sister, which in some ways was probably purposely so, she was sucked into something that I don't think she was necessarily. I don't think June was all that mentally like disturbed.
Yeah,
to be honest,
I don't think so either. Like she was just following it for the sake of being a twin. And I think like the bullying, for example, I think being in a place where you're like the outsider is when you have a twin, you don't have to look for outside sources. You can just look right there. And so that also further pushed them together in that codependency and that reliance on each other, as well as not communicating. Because for what? No one's going to understand me. No one likes me. They probably already weren't communicating with a lot of people in the first place, right? So it was probably a very easy decision to cut people out from June's perspective. So I also, what did you think about like, I guess you didn't really watch this. I don't know if you picked up on this, but I watched an interview of June after the fact. It's a really, really old interview. It's on YouTube. I'll send you the link so you can watch it. It's actually really good.
Please do.
But they didn't really display this in the movie, which is so unfortunate because I think this would have really, like, this would have actually encapsulated what was actually going on. So they actually had a strong hate for each other. And so they were to the point of like, they were trying to like kill each other. Like June like pushed Jennifer into the water to try to kill her because she was just saying like she just wanted to get rid of June. And the same thing would go for Jennifer. They would have journals when they were in the mental institution, especially when they got older, about saying how they did not want each other around. Like they just wanted to get rid of each other. So they really saw each other as...
But we're still codependent. Like, because I read too that they were also like, they would not talk to anyone or anything unless they were like in each other's presence. Like they would just freeze if they were not in their sister's presence. But they also...
but they still had that pact.
Hated each other.
But they also had they had a pact too. I guess, I don't know if they said this at a younger age, but the pact was the only way they could talk to other people is if one of them died. And they can carry on like normal, right? And so I wonder if that was also the push to kill each other or to get rid of one another. Did you think that was displayed in the movie?
I don't know if that particular like sentiment was displayed. Like we have to, like the pact part of it, which I think would have actually made a stronger narrative actually. If they would have explained that. But I mean, we knew that there was some sort of, we knew it was just like bizarre behavior. I don't think it was portrayed as a pact. Like we have to, like an oath we have to keep, you know? Because it felt so like, well, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? And that would have been a really good thing to portray because we could have always gone back to, they made this pact, you know?
But I do think they were making decisions from like the viewer standpoint of like, you really just didn't know what was going on. So it was like you said, it was always murky because I can only like seeing that no one else would understand except for the twins who were in the inner circle there.
That's true.
And no one would ever know unless you were those twins.
Yes, I hear that, but I will say my personal ethics, my personal outlook as a filmmaker is I still would want people to know essential information as a viewer.
Yeah.
Only because that if my viewer is also murky, it makes them less likely to like get the full impact of the narrative. They're left with more questions. I will say that.
Got it.
You know, just because that's just like I want to be as clear as possible and then, you know, use the artistic elements like the, you know, the style and the different animations and stuff. That can be as like murky as possible or like as you need it to be. But the actual like plot points, things we're referencing in the narrative, try to make that as clear cut so that people at least know, you know, because like we were saying, that changes the fact that we know that there was a pact made, you know?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
I definitely think it was more clarity by watching it's an interview with June.
Yeah.
Way more clarity because first of all, she's able to tell you kind of like what was going on amongst them versus being like the outsider and not understanding.
Yeah, agreed. And I honestly can understand getting to the point where you want to like hurt your twin. Because I feel like we've like both gotten to the point where we've like been angry enough to like want to hurt each other. We've definitely been there. So I get that.
Especially because everybody lumps you together too. Like it's like you while you're going through life, right? Especially during those ages where you're trying to figure out who you are. And what you like to do, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, you're automatically always lumped with somebody else. And if someone is not nurturing your wants and desires because you are an individual, unless your desires are the same, then somebody's gets left off.
Absolutely.
And so there becomes a form of like resentment. And I think you see that even in these twins. June is, I don't know June as much, but I think they both are. They're very resentful.
Yeah.
Very resentful.
I agree with that. I think they resent like each other. I think they eventually probably resent the pact that they made. I think they resent the fact that like they're not able to be individuals, and that they ended up
being a twin.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really complex stuff going on that they don't get to work out because they're in this like really toxic kind of codependency with
and they can't
their
talk
own
with anybody
flesh and blood. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't talk with anybody else to even like reason, you know what I mean? Or get a different perspective. All you know are what you two are sharing to each other.
It's like,
and that's a very
closed
warped
themselves off. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's a very warped relation. It's like the relationship itself is toxic, and then they don't step away from each other because they can't, because this pact, and you know, their bond. So it makes it very it never gets healed, it never gets discussed, it never gets whatever until literally one of them dies. Like they went to the extreme of death. You know?
Yep. So how did you feel about their reliance on like the fantasy world?
I thought that was like cinematically, I thought that was appropriate because it was like it was like this like parrot like character that came in there, and like it was like these little puppet, like stop motion puppets.
Yeah.
And that
the
world,
little
little dolls. I thought that was like good cinematically because it definitely it takes you firmly out of the real world and then into this fantasy world. So that made sense filmmaking wise. But I will say it was sort of murky to begin with because I was like, I guess I just wanted more context for like what the fantasy world was doing for them. Like we know that they talked amongst themselves, and we know that that's its own world, but I don't know what the fantasy world was necessarily contributing too much. I know it had its own narrative, but I don't know. It was there were some questions I had with that. But what about you?
Yeah. I don't know that I know what they were getting from it, other than it was just a world that they created that those two girls were living in. Like, I don't think
I hear that.
They were in like such a disillusion that they had to create their own world to live in, to even to deal with the things that they were dealing with, let alone for them to comprehend what they were going through and experience.
Yeah, right? I hear that.
I think that's where, and that is why it looks so like warped and odd, because their imagination and their fantasy world is solely based off of what they imagine. It's not based off of all these other influences of, you know, another child interjecting, maybe, you know, TV interjecting, maybe you know, I don't know, any other outside influences interjecting. They're solely basing that off of what they have in their mind. So I think it just serves as like an escape from the world that they created. And I think also too, like maybe the chaos of the silence that they have to that they're enduring, as well as, you know, they were bullied and stuff that may have provided them the friends they thought they had. They found a lot of escape in that fantasy world. So
oh yeah, definitely. I think
the fantasy world was very creepy, I'm not gonna lie.
No, it definitely was creepy. It was visually unsettling, but then I couldn't figure out why it was there. So it was like sort of double unsettling for me. Yeah. I mean, I knew it was definitely like they made it clear that this was their fantasy world and that this is where the girls go and they, you know, like they have, you know, dealings in that world. But I guess I was just looking for like, how does this connect to the outside world, or does it connect to the outside world? Maybe it doesn't. I guess I was looking for that, and that was like maybe it does. Yeah, like you said, maybe it doesn't, but it had its own like narrative, you know, because there was like the doctor, and then there was like this like weird parrot, and then the dog, and then he eventually like gave the dog's heart to the baby. Remember that scene?
Yeah.
Which was like another disturbing image. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I wanted to either make sense of that world and like just disconnect it, but I wanted some sense made of that world, and I couldn't totally find it. I just knew that it was their own world, and they were, you know, it was their own world, and they were living in it, you know.
Yeah, and I think like that's like one thing that I understood about this movie being a twin is that it's not going to make sense to most people because they're not twins. Like even to us, and we are twins, it doesn't make a whole bunch of sense because we are independent. So there's a different level of twin in our scenario versus their scenario. And we are not heavily relying on each other like this. Nor do we have a made up fantasy world. So a lot of it is not going to make sense to us. But like with this movie, unlike most movies, there are going to be a lot of questions. There are going to be a lot of things that are murky and stay murky because nobody knows what was going on in that inner circle. Nobody.
Yeah, that's true.
And so how can they depict something and make it factual without being in that inner circle?
Agreed. And also even their like language, like the way they would speak, they had like a slur to their speech. That was even like very particular because sometimes you couldn't. They have a British accent, so like we're already trying to like translate or like interpret in our brains, and then they had a slurred British accent, so we had to kind of. It was like some words I didn't understand that what they were saying at all. You know.
And if you ever watch the real interview, it's on YouTube. If you ever want to see it, just type in June Gibbons interview. It's really, really old, but I think it's like an hour or so long. But it is very difficult to watch, and I like it. Hearing how the interview is and how she talks, it's like I somewhat understand like why it was just like don't communicate. Yeah, especially being in like an all Caucasian area in the 60s. I mean, no matter where you were, I'm sure there was some sort of racist behavior going on. So
most definitely. And I think I mean, and also this was like Britain at the time, which we typically associate them with being slightly more like liberal, but they actually had like pretty strong racism there as well.
Everywhere.
But yeah, I think that okay, well, I don't want to switch topics totally, but I want to know what you thought about the idea of them being like silence as like a weapon. You know what I mean? Because I felt like that's sort of what they used in a way. Like I don't think it was silence out of inability, obviously, to speak or any sort of like. I was just wondering. I was like, what are they gaining by silence?
I don't think it was used as a weapon, though.
You don't think so?
I don't think it was used as a weapon. I think it was used out of convenience and they just got stuck in this lie, right? And I think more than anything, they used silence as a mean to, I think the goal was to just kind of like further their relationship and their bond. But it turned into something more sinister and they just didn't know how to get out of it. So I think the silence turned into more of a promise and not wanting to break that and being loyal to my sister, my twin. And they just... like instead of just breaking out of that. And you could even see, like, I don't know if you saw the part, well, I'm sure you did, but you saw the part where that one woman, she comes in and she has her little notepad to like interview or whatever when they're older. And one of them like says something brief or whatever. And she's like, well, did someone so-and-so respond on that notepad? And she gets pissed and like talks because the other woman spoke. And so they like took that just so seriously. It was just like to us, it's like, it's not that serious, you know? But to them, it was just like, it was the end of the world if you spoke. So.
That's so wild because I was like the whole time I guess because we are twins, I was just kept putting myself in that position and thinking about like how could what is otherwise considered a very rare relationship, like not everybody has a twin sibling, like you know a lot of people have siblings but not a twin, so it's already a very particular experience. But then you know usually it's met with kind of like you know people see it as novelty or it's really interesting or it's like very cute and people kind of like do that kind of thing. And to some degree it is kind of like that. But more than anything, it's really about like the just having a deep bond with this person because you have experienced so much of life together. But
exactly.
I just think it was just interesting that their twinship, what every other twin basically has, you know, everybody else, every other twin who's born that way has that potential. Theirs became so warped in a way that has never been. I've never seen a twinship that warped.
Yeah, me either.
You know,
and I think the closest thing
TV.
I've ever seen would be like we said, Mark and Matthew. That was something I'm like, when I saw this, I was like, this gives me Mark and Matthew.
Yeah.
They weren't even this extreme to the point where they weren't talking, but their conversations were very minimal with people outside of their twin.
Which I always understood, and I think it's because we were twins. I understood why they did, you know, because I mean, there was plenty of times I would have preferred to like be with my sister over being in this class solo or being in this place solo or whatever. Because like Catelyn was always a comfortable space for me, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would have preferred that in a lot of instances, but I knew it was healthiest for us to become individuals, you know, and like
exactly.
And it would have been damaging for Catelyn to like if Catelyn had to be dragged along to everything I was doing, or if I had to be dragged along to everything Catelyn was doing. That would have been damaging. And we see what that did for June and Jennifer. Is June was in a lot of ways dragged along by Jennifer, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so
for her whole life until she passed away, I think.
And Jennifer was pretty aggressive about making sure that June like followed her lead in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah, even when it came to like writing, because real June has actually published a book. And Jennifer was just so envious of that she actually went and published her book. And it was, you know, I guess a little bit successful, if you will. But it was just like, how dare you? Like, you did this and I didn't. Like, Jennifer was just willing to pretty much compromise the whole twinship.
Yeah, that's why I saw them. I started to see them as like yin and yang. Like, you know how yin and yang has that black and then the little bit of white in the black and then a white with a little bit of black in it. That's what I just saw them as like these like twins, not Pisces, because Pisces is like just different opposites, but sort of the same moral compass. Yin and yang is about light and dark. And I saw them as like really encompassing like light and dark by the end. You know what I mean?
100%.
Which is, I don't think twins are rarely ever portrayed that way. They're either portrayed as like all light or all dark, but like moving in the same lane. And I think it was just really, really interesting to see that they portrayed it complexly with like these, you know, some darkness here, some light here, or some lightness there, some dark here, and like and then and power dynamic. There's a power dynamic there that I think
for sure
the average person doesn't understand because, like we said from the outside looking in, twins are a novelty. They are a rarity. They're almost something to be consumed by other people. So
for sure,
they don't think about the fact that there is human relationships and there's a dynamic there, which the twins are mostly aware of. And everybody else is sort of observing from a third party, you know? And I think it's great they put this on film because that allows us to see into a space that sometimes we really don't get to see. You know, like I don't think most people really understand a twin dynamic. I don't think most people will understand it unless they are one. You know, or like a multiple dynamic. Like probably triplets understand or quadruplets or whatever. But like, you know, multiple dynamics are a little bit different than just, in my opinion, a sibling. You know?
100%. The dynamic is definitely different. I even talk about like sometimes I think I've shared this on here. I'm not sure, but I never really had to make a friend until I went to college when me and Courtney were like completely separated. In like school and stuff, like everybody knew we were twins. Everybody was like, oh, that's cool. You know, they either came to us or Courtney was friends with them first, or I like, you know, and just in circumstances were around people. And so that's I kind of made friends. I never had to be like, oh, I want to talk to you and like just walk up to them and approach them. It just kind of was like circumstance a lot of the time, or Courtney would bring friends over kind of thing. And so it's kind of like that, like, because I always had a friend, I never had to make a friend. And so I think that's kind of like what happened in this scenario, where they didn't have to talk because they understood each other already.
Yeah.
They didn't have to talk. And they found like their bond was their silence, because they didn't have to talk to each other. Versus if they were an only children, they would have to talk because nobody else would know normally.
Agreed. I think that we see that bond between twins as not as being totally positive, totally good, totally, you know, beneficial. But what they're really showing is that really can be a crutch. Like, it can lead to codependence. And like Caitlin and I kept saying, like, we obviously are not as extreme as June and Jennifer were, but we even experienced a level of codependence just in our relationship that we've had. And we had to like unpack where we were being codependent on each other in different ways.
For sure. When, I feel like we just recently finished unpacking that.
Yeah.
So,
like, we really only, like you said, recently only really finished unpacking codependence, you know? And it's difficult to do because it's woven in your life in so many small, subtle ways.
Yeah, for sure. It really is.
I just think June and Jennifer are a big glaring example of what codependence in twins really looks like if it goes totally unchecked.
Left. Yeah. For sure.
And you know, I am grateful to our mom. Yeah, it is pretty scary. Like, you know, I mean, to the point of life threatening, you know. I don't know if everybody gets to the point of dying, but twins can get to the point of like hindering each other's lives, growth, all of that, because you're trying to maintain a twinship versus being full and complete individuals. And I think what we do now, which is great, is we're still obviously on our journey individually, but we are full individuals who also were born and raised together and have a similar experience. And I think we interact more now as like sisters than like,
for sure,
just being identified as twins, you know, and not being sort of like lumped together, and, you know.
Yeah. And I think also too, like, while we actually communicate, which these girls did in their own way.
That too, yeah.
But I think in their case, the silence was their communication in so many ways. So they just had like that to upkeep, right?
Yeah.
And silence was maintaining their bond, versus our bond is maintained by actively communicating.
Yeah, that too.
And effectively communicating. Like, they were communicating, it just wasn't effective.
Agreed. So, yeah, that's very true. I agree with that. 100%.
Is the difference. Yeah.
I also think we weren't the type to like, when we would have things that we had to do together, we would still communicate with the outside world. For sure. More than anything, I think we share similar like outlooks on life, ideologies. And so we might reiterate the same point. That's probably what you'll find more than anything. But rather than just shut down and totally be like, we're only communicating with each other, we'll communicate when we have to with, you know, the world, you know. And in some ways, I do.
We never isolated ourselves.
Yeah, we never isolated ourselves. But I also think that was a large part due to like intentional parenting too. Because I'm thinking about, I'm like, it had to have been an intentional choice for mom to make sure we weren't like codependent, you know. So I just think we were fortunate that we didn't have any like parental decisions that would force us to, you know, or would prompt us, I won't say force, to turn inwards rather than actually communicating with the outside world, you know?
Yeah. Which I think like some of the scenarios that we dealt with could have, let's be honest.
Oh yeah, we dealt. I was thinking about the whole time, I was like, well, we probably experienced enough trauma to have done something similar to
for sure.
Jane
Well, and the funny
and
thing is, I
Jennifer.
think like
June and Jennifer.
when we would go to that traumatic place, we kind of did that. Like
In some ways, yeah.
we would heavily be during that time and that those weekends, we would be heavily codependent, heavily.
Yeah.
And so like that's why I think I was very empathetic for these two girls, because I relate on a whole different level, because that could have been us for real.
Yeah.
Truly.
They didn't seem to have come from a traumatic child like home, at least. I don't know.
Yeah, not from my understanding.
So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because their parents seem to be like trying to figure out like how do
what was going on. Like they even thought it was very peculiar. Yeah. I do think resources at that time just were not readily available.
Probably limited. Yeah.
And so it made it. I think that just made it 10 times harder. Versus like if they would have been born like today, I think that would have looked very differently.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely.
So what did you think about Jennifer passing away?
I think, honestly, as effective as it sounds, I was like glad in some ways, because I was June needed to be free. Like, and June was really, really hung up on. June would have continued to be loyal to her sister and the pact. And I think June, I think Jennifer also knew. Like, do you remember that moment where she was like, they had her like in the morgue, but it was kind of a stylistic thing, but they had her like looking at Jennifer and smiling while Jennifer was crying. And I think that was like, they were trying to show like her spirit was like happy to have been gone and been like, I'm glad I'm out of here so my sister can survive and thrive.
Yeah.
And actually be
and I think Jennifer
person.
knew what she was taking from June. I think she realized at some point that she knew what she was taking from June, and robbing June of a life outside, because I think at that point now they're in the mental institution and now they're able to physically see other things and acknowledge other things going on outside of them, whether they're communicating with them or not. They did have the understanding to know what was going on around them and what they're listening to. And so I really think I personally just feel like June felt guilty.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Because I think Jennifer knew that she was the troublemaker, the dark energy, I guess, at least in the group. Because everything that they did that landed them in like prison or a mental institution was started by June. Was Jennifer, yeah. Jennifer. Yeah. Okay, I do have another question. What do you think about their relationship with the two dudes?
Yeah, that was very odd.
Yeah, it was very odd. And I felt slightly like, okay, the girls are obviously pursuing them, but I also felt like it was slightly predatory because the dudes knew they were kind of off. You know what I mean? I thought they knew they were kind of off.
But I think they also knew that those girls were trouble. Like, and what I got from that is they knew that those girls were like a symbol of trouble. And so they were also like thrill seekers and troublemakers. And so they wanted to be a part of that, if you will. But I do agree with you in saying that one, especially that one guy, he seemed very like predatory. Like, what can I get from these girls? There's something off and I want to take advantage of it, or I want to be known for dealing with them. Whatever he was looking for, it wasn't genuine.
Or just some like thrill. Like, I felt like he was definitely like, well, they're probably like basket cases, right? Like they would have been seen as like outsiders, but like, I'm going to be able to like get them and use them however I want to, because
exactly. Yeah. I agree with that.
Basket cases basically. And they were like, well, they're like obsessed with me. Like I could see like in his male brain being like, these like weirdos are like obsessed with me,
Yeah.
So that's how I felt like he was kind of characterized. And like, and then that kind of, I think from then on, that's when June and Jennifer just started kind of like going off the rails.
Going downhill.
Yeah.
And they started doing drugs and whatnot. So I think that also didn't help.
Yeah. It was like a snowball effect for them.
Yeah, it really was. And I think also too, that was probably like a moment where they really realized they were outside. Like they were truly outside.
Yeah.
Because they first of all they had to use drugs to kind of like fit in, and then these guys that they were kind of like dealing with, well, they were brothers, I guess. They like, even that was like forced.
Yeah.
So
I agree. It was very you could tell from then on it was just going down a dark path.
Yeah,
for
very,
sure.
very much so.
Because like the only people they were attaching to were people who were troublemakers, problematic. They weren't like, you know, and I guess it's because they were already outsiders too, so they just like banded together with the other outsiders.
Yeah.
Which is wild because I'm like, did they would talk to the guys separately, right? Like they would talk to the dudes.
I don't know.
At least they showed like Jennifer having a conversation with the guy one time.
Yeah.
And her sister wasn't there, but so I don't know.
Very true. That's very true.
So that was like the only person they really had like conversation with, not in their sister's presence, So
very true. So I do want to throw this out here before we wrap up, but there's a theory out there, or speculation out there, that that June killed her twin Jennifer. What do you think?
Honestly, I don't put it past. I really don't. I mean, because they already had such a tumultuous relationship amongst themselves, and then knowing their pact, and then also seeing their behavior, it's like, and then knowing that she died on the way to another facility.
Yeah,
I could see
she was
happening.
like relatively fine before.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule that totally out. I think they ended up ruling her having like a heart attack or something, right? Or some issue with her heart. But I think that's totally a reasonable conclusion to come up with. Honestly, I don't think it's far-fetched, actually.
And I think too, they have a history of wanting each other to not be around anymore, and like them actually like trying to go through with that. So
yeah, I was shocked that I understood the desire to want to harm your twin. Like I understood that that wasn't a question to me of like why that you would like get angry enough, but them acting on it was like bizarre to me, because I never had gotten to that point of like, or I won't say never, but I've like, something has always clicked in my brain to stop. You know what I mean? And I felt like for them, nothing ever clicked in their brain to like stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people always had to pull them off or like do something like that, And that's what was more concerning to me, is like, if they could have gotten away with it, I think they would have killed each other sooner than they actually ended up dying.
I agree. I think if somebody in their attempts, if it would have like went through, like I think either one of them would have been very satisfied. Just because it just kind of how she was at the end of the movie, like while her sister was laying there dead and she sees the body, like she was sad for that moment, but the next kind of day or next scene, she's gone back to normal, living her best life. Like it was liberating for her. So
that's just so interesting, because it's like the closest person in the world to you is also like your arch nemesis. Which is so not our experience, but
at all. But I do understand it too, because like there's moments where you were my arch nemesis,
but it was always a moment.
Yeah, for sure.
There seemed to be like more than half their lives.
So I'm reading an interview with Miss Wallace. So she's one of the ladies that had a pretty good relationship with the twins, and kind of would chat with the twins, and ultimately read the girl's journal to kind of make this story known, right? And so she remains friends, wonderful friends is what it says, with June Gibbons, because June is still alive. And she asked June, why did you do it? Like, why did you only speak to other? And June till this day remains on her stance, or she said, I really, really, really do not know. It's a mystery.
It's so weird. I wonder if they were just like, I wonder if they were just like different spirits, like inhabiting bodies, different bodies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then like they came together, got together, I guess. And then like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess
because I was getting such a like demonic energy, unfortunately, from Jennifer. I was like,
honestly,
Jennifer's energy does not feel just like bad human or like a narcissist or like just an asshole. Like she really felt like dark energy,
for sure.
You know,
yeah.
Just and I think the actress did a really good job portraying that. Yeah,
for sure. Mm-hmm.
Like nothing good can come of this person just because they're so dark. You know.
Yeah. And the fact that she was also like, because I think also too, like if I'm doing something wrong, I'm not willing to take you down with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Jennifer was adamant that we go down together, except for in her death.
Exactly.
So, which I was pretty surprised that like June was still living. Because I was like, there's no way out of this unless they both die. Because June and Jennifer, they were just so adamant about being silent in their relationship and bonding in silence.
Do you think Jennifer just had like an abusive relationship over her sister? Because now I'm thinking about it from that angle.
I mean, I think it was abusive. I think it was possessive. I think it was like narcissistic. I think it was like, if you ask me, I don't even necessarily believe in things like this, but I think it was very like demonic and dark and just like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know. It's like something I've never seen. And like, even like in pictures and stuff like that of like the actual girls, like you can see June and then you see Jennifer and you're just like, something's just off. In my personal opinion.
That makes me think that I think Jennifer had an actual mental health, probably like, or mental illness, not even a mental like health issue. Like, I think it was beyond like depression and anxiety and like, you know, that kind of thing.
I can see that.
I think she really she's probably a sociopath, if not a psychopath. And,
maybe.
And she like genetically probably one. And, but she was born a twin. And so she ended up, the closest person in the world to her ended up being like basically her lackey. And that was the main person she tried to control.
Yeah. And like, it's easy to hide behind that when you're you know, 4, and then you make that bond and all that person knows is you know? So yeah.
Yeah. That was what I kind of concluded at the end, as I really thought Jennifer was a mentally ill person. And then her sister was caught into it. Like probably an undiagnosed mentally ill person, an undiagnosed true sociopathic, possibly psychopathic person, you know.
Apparently something they were like a Ted Bundy type, though. Oh, yeah, for sure. Apparently, I don't know if they both were, or I don't know if they both were. I think they both were, and they both received tranquilizers. Among other drugs, but they were diagnosed with some. I do think that like diagnoses back then were not what they are now. So
yeah, I feel like they would have said schizophrenia for a range of things.
Yeah, I was gonna say like anything that was abnormal is like schizophrenia.
Yeah, because the way she was being portrayed didn't feel schizophrenic to me. It just felt sociopathic or psychopathic. Yeah, so sociopathic, psychopathic, one of those pathies. Yeah, it didn't feel like schizophrenia quite, but that could also be the filmmakers deciding not to portray her that way. So I don't know. You know?
For real, yeah, that's true. I don't know. I do agree with you. I think there was some type of, I think sociopath, or psychopath for sure. Like something definitely was a little mentally, even like the desire to illness. Yeah, even like the pyromaniac part of it, like desire to cause fire, the desire to do
she all like these, wanted to destroy. She sought out destruction.
Inside. Yeah.
Her sister, she wanted to destroy her sister. She wanted to destroy other people. Like she sought destruction.
Yeah,
through and through, from the beginning to the end. Like her entire worldview, I think, was warped, and she just happened 100%. To be born a twin. I think that's what really this story was about. Like a psychopath who happened to be born a twin. You know. So
so that wraps up our view of being a twin and watching Silent Twins. I highly, highly, highly suggest watching the movie. It's really, really good, I think. And it's kind of like a psychological thriller, but in a whole different aspect. You can catch it on Peacock. I think that's where we saw it. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So it's on Peacock. And yeah, so thank you for tuning in on this episode, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.